What if one ordinary evening you discovered that you were never invisible, and that strangers had been watching you all along? 7 signs reveal the unsettling truth about a woman who thought age made her fade into the background, but instead made her unforgettable. By the time she realizes it, it may already be too late. Do you want to know the signs? The clock above the old cafe door struck 7. The sound echoed through the quiet evening air like a soft warning. Margaret sat alone at the corner table, her silver hair falling gently across her shoulders. She reached for her cup of tea, but her hand trembled slightly, making the spoon clink against the saucer. The cafe was nearly empty. Only a few young couples whispered across the dimly lit room. Their laughter felt distant, like it belonged to another world. Margaret lowered her eyes, adjusting her shawl, trying to disappear into the shadows. She had grown used to silence. She had grown used to being unseen, but tonight felt different. There was a sharpness in the air, a shift she could not explain. She felt it first as a prickle on the back of her neck. A gaze. Someone was watching. She slowly lifted her head and scanned the room. At a table near the window, a man stared at her with an intensity that froze her breath. He was not young, yet not old either. His eyes did not carry pity. They carried recognition. Margaret's chest tightened. Her pulse quickened. She tried to look away, but her reflection in the glass betrayed her. The dim lights caught the curve of her cheek, the brightness of her eyes, and the graceful way she held her posture. For the first time in years, she saw what others saw. She was not invisible. She was not forgotten. But before she could gather her thoughts, the man stood. His chair scraped loudly against the wooden floor. Every head turned. The cafe grew silent, heavy with expectation. He walked towards her with deliberate steps, each one echoing like a drumbeat in her ears. Margaret's breath grew shallow. The scent of coffee and old wood pressed around her, trapping her in place. When he finally reached her table, he leaned down and whispered words that made her skin turn cold. "Do you even know," he said softly, "how many eyes follow you when you walk into a room?" The air left her lungs. Her fingers gripped the edge of the table. For a moment the walls seemed to close in. It was not a compliment, it was a revelation. And it carried something far more unsettling than admiration. Because now Margaret understood. She had been watched, not just tonight, but always. Margaret's heart thundered inside her chest. The man's words hung in the air, heavy, unshakable. She wanted to dismiss him, to laugh politely and send him away. But his tone was not light, and his eyes did not soften. They studied her with the weight of unspoken truths. Her hand shook as she set the cup down. The porcelain rattled against the saucer, breaking the silence. "Excuse me," she whispered, her voice barely steady. The man straightened, his presence towering over her small corner. "You have no idea," he said, his voice calm yet edged with something sharp. The cafe seemed to tilt, every sound stretched and distorted. The hum of the old refrigerator, the ticking of the wall clock, the faint chatter of the young couple, now hushed. Margaret swallowed hard. Her palms were damp. She wanted to rise, to leave, but her legs would not obey. The man's gaze did not release her. It pinned her like an insect under glass. And then, without warning, he smiled. Not a warm smile, not a smile of kindness, but a smile that carried knowledge. Knowledge that Margaret did not want uncovered. He leaned closer, his breath warm against her ear. "I could tell you 7 signs," he murmured. Her stomach turned. 7 signs, the title of a cruel game. She felt the weight of the room pressing down, waiting for his next word. "First," he said, his eyes flicking toward her hair. "The silver in your hair is not weakened. It glows in the light. It makes people look white." Margaret's fingers touched the strands that framed her face. Her chest grew tight. "Second," he continued, "your eyes. They do not fade. They carry a fire, even when you think no one sees it." Margaret blinked, but his words pierced her like needles. "Third," he whispered, his voice lower now, "you walk with grace, even when you try to hide it. It is in the way your shoulders never collapse, the way your spine refuses to bend." Margaret shifted uncomfortably in her seat. She had never thought of herself this way. Her mind wanted to reject every word, but her body remembered the truth. The way strangers glanced at her in markets, the way conversations paused when she entered a room. The man's voice deepened, pulling her further into his web. Fourth sign, your silence speaks louder than chatter. When you sit in a room, people notice. They cannot ignore the weight of your presence. Margaret's hands trembled. The cafe walls felt smaller, the shadows darker. He was not describing admiration, he was describing surveillance. Attention that lingered far too long. Fifth, he said, his smile widening slightly, lines on your skin. They are not marks of age, they are maps. People read them, people follow them. They imagine the life carved upon your face. Margaret's throat tightened. Her reflection in the window stared back, pale, eyes wide. She wanted to shatter the glass, to erase what he saw. But the man's words kept carving deeper. Sixth, he whispered, leaning closer, the way you dress. Not for others, but for yourself. A shawl, a simple dress, a touch of color. It is not loud, but it is honest. People notice honesty, and they crave it. Margaret pressed her arms tighter around her shawl, suddenly vulnerable. The cafe lights buzzed overhead, flickering faintly as though the electricity itself strained under his presence. And the seventh sign. He paused. The silence was unbearable. Margaret's pulse roared in her ears. Her lips parted, but no words came. Finally he spoke. The seventh sign is the most dangerous. It is the one you do not see, confidence that hides beneath doubt. People sense it, they chase it, and once they sense it, they never stop watching. Margaret felt the blood drain from her face. Her hands clutched the edge of the table until her knuckles turned white. The man straightened, satisfied. You never realized it, he said softly, but others did. And once you are seen, you cannot be unseen. The room spun. Margaret rose unsteadily, the chair scraping the floor. Every eye in the cafe was on her now, but were they truly watching? Or had his words poisoned her mind, making her feel eyes where there were none? She staggered toward the door, the cool night air calling her like salvation. The man did not follow, but his gaze lingered, pressing against her back like a shadow that refused to fade. The bell above the door rang sharply as she stepped outside. The street was empty. The lamps flickered weakly, casting long, distorted shapes across the pavement. She wrapped her shawl tighter, each step quick, uneven. But the sensation did not leave her. Eyes, always eyes. Watching from windows, from cars parked too long at the corner, from shadows that stretched where no one should stand. Margaret's breath grew ragged, her heartbeat pounded in her temples. She reached her small apartment building, fumbling with the keys, her hands shaking too much to fit them into the lock. Finally the door opened. She slipped inside, slammed it shut, and pressed her back against the wood. Silence. The silence of her home. Her safe place. But was it safe? Her reflection in the dark window seemed to move. Her heart leapt. And then she remembered his final words. Once you are seen, you cannot be unseen. Margaret turned slowly toward the window, and in the glass, just beyond her reflection, another face stared back. Margaret stood in the dark, her breath shallow, her body trembling. The silence pressed against her ears, broken only by the faint hum of the city outside her window. Her hands slowly fell from her face, and she realized something. The fear that had consumed her tonight was not only about the man at the cafe. It was not only about the strange reflection or the whispers at her door. It was about herself. For years, she had tried to disappear. She had folded herself into quiet corners, hidden her smile, lowered her voice. She believed age had made her invisible, but tonight the truth had forced its way in. She had been seen all along, and perhaps that was not a curse. Perhaps it was a kind of power. Her reflection in the shattered glass no longer frightened her. Dozens of fragments caught the faint glow of the candle's last flame, each one holding a piece of her face, strong, defined, alive. Margaret straightened her back. She pulled the shawl tighter around her shoulders, but not as a shield. Rather like a queen adjusting her crown. The voice that haunted her had grown quiet, as if waiting for her choice. She walked to the window and pulled the curtain wide open. The night met her eyes, silent streets, empty shadows. No face in the glass this time, only Margaret, older and beautiful, staring back with a steady calm. For the first time in years, she did not flinch. She did not hide. She whispered into the night, her voice steady and clear. "I am seen." The weight in her chest lifted. The silence no longer felt suffocating. It felt like freedom. Margaret turned away from the window, the echo of fear replaced by a strange and powerful calm. She blew out the final candle, letting the room sink into darkness. Not with dread, but with peace. Because she finally understood the seventh sign. It was not danger, it was not a curse, it was recognition. And she was ready to live with it.